And that is our full musical intro for Making Connections, our interview segment. Now, as we heard in the Daily Reflection, July 27th was the anniversary of the signing of the Korean War Armistice, which ended the fighting here on the peninsula. Now, many soldiers came to protect Korea as part of the UN forces. And unbeknownst to many, some 100,000 soldiers of Mexican origin also fought bravely in the war. These were forgotten soldiers of a so-called forgotten war. Now, joining us this morning to talk about those soldiers and other Mexico and South Korea ties is His Excellency Bruno Figueroa, the ambassador of Mexico to Korea. He is here to shed light on the stories of the Mexican-Korean War veterans, and also, as we look ahead to the 60th anniversary of diplomatic ties between our two countries next year, we'll also discuss the diplomatic relations between what we call the two middle power countries as well. So good morning, Ambassador, and welcome to Life Abroad.
Good morning, Sangyeon. Thank you for inviting me in Life Abroad. And I say buenos dias to your audience.
Buenos dias. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I understand you've been here for quite a while. You came as the Mexican ambassador to Korea back in 2017. So that means you're here for the Pyeongchang Olympic Games, now the second year of the pandemic as well. So looking back, I don't know, what has changed about your maybe impressions of Korea and maybe the Korean people as well?
Well, absolutely a lot, because when I arrived, I had practically a blank page. And now I have a very rich and complex sense of the Korean reality. And I think that happens to so many people because still Korea is so little known in its inside, in its society. But this is changing very fast.
What has impressed you the most? I mean, what's been, I guess, the most different in what you expected, and then when you came here and then you lived here, what's kind of changed most? What surprised you the most?
I would say one of the stereotypes is that the Korean society is very uniform, very organized. I would even say cold. And what I found is a warm society, warm people. Really, I have many experiences of generosity and kindness. I could tell you, for instance, that one personal experience. I love to bike, and I went biking with some friends to Chuncheon. We took the train from Yongsan Station. We went down in Chuncheon. That's 100 kilometers, and so we biked back.
Wow. How long did that take you?
Oh, the whole day. The problem is that it was early October. It was very cold and it rained.
Oh, no.
So we were soaked to the bones. There was wind. It was really very tough. Yikes. And arriving around close to Guri, I couldn't go any further. So I took the train back alone. And I was shaking in the train. Just soaked, you can imagine. And then there was a group in the wagon of people who were hiking. And then a lady came to me and handed me her thermo with hot water.
Wow.
So I had that hot water.
To warm up a bit.
Yeah, it was. And she smiled and I smiled. Unfortunately, I don't speak Korean, so it was such a great experience, you know.
So it was quite hard, but it gives you a great story, doesn't it? I mean, I think a lot of the great stories, there's a little bit of hardship involved as well, but then there's something nice at the end. Would that be one of your, I don't know, would it be one of your favorite moments of your stay here in Korea so far?
Oh, I have so many great moments that I lost the count. But you mentioned, I ran with the Olympic torch in December 2017.
You were one of the torchbearers?
That's right. So that was an amazing, great honor. For me, for my country and my family who was watching me running with it. I was at the opening of the Olympics and to listen the roar of the people in the stadium when the Korean team entered, North and South Korean team united.
Right.
That was really amazing, an amazing moment.
It was kind of cold that day too, wasn't it?
It was also freezing, but with a warm heart at that moment.
Mexico had sent a delegation too to the Pyeongchang Games, didn't they?
Yes. We had a delegation of 7 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's the participation, I think, that counts a lot. All right. Well, let's talk about the forgotten soldiers of what we sometimes say the Korean War, the forgotten war. I mean, this was very interesting for me as well. So last year, you co-wrote an article with then Ambassador of Mexico to the U.S., Marta Barcena, about these forgotten soldiers of Mexican origin. So this was the Korean War, of course, took place before the official diplomatic ties between our two countries were established. And yet some 100,000 soldiers of Mexican descent fought in the Korean War. But they fought under the U.S. armed forces. So that might be another reason why they were kind of the forgotten soldiers. Tell us how that came to be, why they were under the U.S. armed forces first, and then about this kind of attempt to tell their story. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. In 2019, precisely preparing for the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the war, we started to dig in about what happened with the Mexican participation in the war. I remembered a friend of my father who fought in the Korean War. And so I wondered what happened there. And the information is really mind-blowing. Accidents, anomalies happen in history. And I think this is one of them because Mexico did not participate. The Mexican government did not participate in the Korean War.
Right.
We were not at war against North Korea. We sent some food and medicine as humanitarian aid to South Korea, but nothing more. But in spite of this, there already was a huge Mexican community in the United States. And so many young men were drafted to the U.S. Army and were sent to Korea. But we also know of cases of Mexican young men who went north to the U.S.
They volunteered?
Volunteered
Wow.
to the Korean War. So it's unbelievable the high number of soldiers of Mexican origin who were there. What is sad in this story is that when they came back either to the U.S. or to Mexico, they felt absolutely indifference. They were Mexicans, not Americans, so they were not the same type of heroes.
I see.
And in Mexico, that was a story from a foreign land. And so they were really, really sad about their personal situation. They couldn't share their feelings. And it's terrible to be part of in a war. And they lived so much sufferings and struggles. And they had to keep that for themselves.
They did not receive recognition from the Mexican government, and because they didn't receive recognition, I guess there was very little recognition from the people and even their loved ones as well. So they had to just kind of live with that burden as well. So you it came from almost a personal point. You heard a personal story from your friend, who I understand was also a diplomat, and so that kind of gave you the impetus to kind of dig into this.
Yeah, it's impressive that 1 week after we started looking for that story, a friend told me, the father of Ambassador Ivan Sierra is a veteran and he's alive. So he was the first veteran that we could have contact with. I called him. It was very moving. He cried. He told me he never told his story to his family. It was the first time he opened up to someone else. And from that moment, we wrote articles, I made presentations, and suddenly we knew about more veterans alive. We're talking about 90 years old veterans. And in April 24th, they established for the first time an association of Mexican veterans of the Korean War.
Was this last year or this year?
No, this year. This year. With the presence of the Mexican Ministry of Defense and the first Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Korea. That was an absolutely moving moment. And now they are having this recognition that lacked for decades, but it's never too late
It's never
to
too
recognize.
late. How many veterans are still alive?
Well, in Mexico, we know about 5. The first president of the association, unfortunately, passed away 1 week later after the establishment of the association. But his family told us that he was very happy. He ended his life very, very happy.
That's wonderful. So they have never had a chance to also visit Korea, or were they able to come as part of, because I know that Korea has this program of inviting veterans, but I think they work with the governments of each country, right? I'm not sure if the veterans from Mexico had a chance to come.
Absolutely. Since there was no association, there were unknown to even to the Korean government.
Right.
So that is starting to change. They received, the families of veterans received dozens of masks against COVID-19 last year and this year, and they will be invited next year when we will celebrate our 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations. We hope to have some veterans here in Korea.
Let's hope so too. That's great. Like you say, it's never too late to recognize these sort of forgotten heroes. But as long as they are with us, hopefully they can join us here in Korea next year as well. I want to read out some messages from our listeners. Choi Hee-suk saying, "Welcome, Ambassador. I wish you all the best." And 2311 saying, "Welcome, Ambassador. Mexico, especially Cancun, is my dream travel destination." So we have, I think we have a lot of fans here in Korea of Mexico as well. But I think like these stories, again, they are sometimes not told, or we don't know about these stories to even tell them. So hopefully these stories will come out as part of the celebrations of the 60th anniversary. Now, the diplomatic ties were 1962. So both of our countries have really come a long way since then. What are sort of the notable points of cooperation between our two countries over the past 60 years?
Well, I would mention 3 waves. The first one is the establishment of political relationship, then strong economic ties, and this is a massive right now. The Korean investments in Mexico are impressive, but also the trade between our countries is going up and up and up. Korea is Mexico's 4th trade partner. Mexico is for Korea the first partner in Latin America. But the third wave is very interesting, and it's societies coming together.
Mexican people, like cultural.
We established the first flight between Mexico and Korea in 2017. So only 4 years ago. And I can tell you that that's a huge difference. When you, in only 15 hours, you are in the other country. And today, thousands of people, especially young people from each country, want to go to the other. They want to know more about culture, about our societies, our history. And so that's what's happening now. More people are traveling to the other country, and we are establishing a lot of bonds.
And I think a lot of that, like you mentioned, is kind of based on culture. And regarding that, I have a question about the Colectivo Nacional MX, or Arirang on Cumbia. It was released last year as a project by the Korean Cultural Center, the Korean Embassy in Mexico, as well as the Mexico City government. And this was meant to bridge the gap between Korea and Mexico. And I understand it's the first Cumbia rendition of Arirang. And you tweeted about it as well. I'm not familiar with what cumbia is. So can you tell us more about this?
Yes, of course. We stimulate the music fusions between Mexico and Korea precisely because it brings us more together. Cumbia is a music movement originally from Colombia, but we in the Caribbean, we are so close, one country with the other, that in Mexico we also have cumbia bands. It's made especially for dancing. And so someone decided to create an arirang with
cumbia style.
That's right.
It's a style of folk song, right?
Well, yeah. It's a a dance a dance style.
Okay.
Very popular in all Latin America. So this is a great achievement, a great result.
All right. So now Arirang is finding a new sort of audience in Mexico as well through a more familiar kind of art form. And I guess we're seeing, is this cumbia that we're seeing right now that
Exactly.
Christina has pulled up? Okay. So some amazing costumes. It looks like the Day of the Dead parade
That's right.
in Mexico City as well. So this is when we would see it on a massive scale as well. Can you tell us about some of the events that are being planned for the 60th anniversary? I know that a lot of the celebrations, especially for the Korean Immigration Day as well, they had to be kept kind of low-key because of the pandemic, but hopefully next year, fingers crossed.
Oh, yes. We definitely want to have a huge celebrations in
Right.
both countries. Korea will be the guest of honor in the most important cultural event in Mexico, which is the Cervantino Festival in next September. But also here in Korea, we will have a massive exhibition of archaeology, of Mexican archaeology in the National Museum of Korea.
Wow.
We plan also to have an exhibition about the Mexican veterans of the Korean War. We will publish a book about our relationship and our people, high-level visit. So really we have a quite ambitious program for next year, and we really want it to be a milestone.
I mentioned in the opening about this designation of Korean Immigration Day. How important do you think it is as well that it was passed as kind of a nationally recognized day in Mexico?
Yes, May 4th is the day of the Korean immigrant. Well, it's the first immigration day of any nationality that was voted in the Mexican Congress. That shows how important today is the Korean presence in Mexico, and we want to recognize the first Korean immigrants arrived in Mexico in 1905, so that's quite a long time ago.
Right.
And so the presence is stronger and stronger, as we hope that the Mexican presence in Korea also will get stronger. I had the opportunity to inaugurate a Mexican garden in Suncheonman National Garden, South Korea, in Suncheon. And it's the only place in the whole Korea with the name of Mexico.
So if we go down to Suncheon, we should check out the Mexican garden there as well.
That's right.
Sounds
It's
wonderful.
pretty beautiful.
How big is the population, the Mexican population here in Korea right now?
Well, it's still quite small, especially with the pandemic. It went down a little bit because most of the Mexican presence here are students. So around 800 people.
Okay.
And compared to the around 15 or 20,000 Koreans in Mexico, there's quite a large difference. But I can tell you that so many young people in Mexico, especially those who love K-pop, they want to come to Korea.
Right.
And they want to study in Korea. So we are stimulating that so that they can come here.
Well, hopefully with the pandemic, hopefully it dies down next year and we can see more Mexican students and also travelers visit Korea as well. For our last question, is there anything you'd like to share with maybe the Mexicans who are in Korea, or maybe, like you said, the many more who might be interested in coming to Korea?
Well, I have for them a piece of advice when they arrive. Open wide your eyes and your ears and learn the Korean way, the work ethic, the commitment to the family, to the workplace, to the country. There is so much to learn from Korea that it's admirable.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'm sure there's a lot to learn from Mexico that we Koreans can also take as well. But I want to thank you once again for taking the time to share your stories and also remind us about the close ties between our two countries. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
감사합니다. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.